Today I'm chatting with Rebecca Rowntree, who is a freelance creative director. Rebecca and I have known each other for quite a while now, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
Like,
Many years.
great to see your career grow, and again in the changes in the market. I'd love to hear about how you started and what kind of content you create. So, do you want to maybe
Yeah,
start at the beginning?
yeah. So this is going to be a long story, but it might sort of give a good example of how my brain works and how I work. So I got into advertising like most students. I did a university degree on advertising, and I got my first job pretty soon after graduating, after doing a lot of placements. And one thing that sort of struck me even then, that was in 2007, was that the type of work that was coming out of ad agencies were always starting with 30-second TV ads. I remember being so excited that one of the scripts I'd written with my creative partner was going to go on TV, but I knew deep down that it was just the wrong answer to the brief. It was, I think it was like a skincare product for young women, and I was just like, we don't believe in these type of ads. So that was that kind of real weird sort of complexity of wanting to be on TV and doing the great creative work, but also knowing that wasn't the right solution.
Like, in terms of the media planning side, like, that's super interesting, right? Like, your understanding of media planning and where things go, not just having a great idea. It's really important.
So once I got to sort of do a lot of different placements, I realized that I needed to think outside the box and go for an agency that wasn't traditional. So at the time went to Michael Eady's and Bednash, which was kind of the equivalent of Naked, who's quite a big strategic agency. And just the way they worked there was pairing you up with a strategist. And so the beauty with a strategist is that they can also think about the media planning side of things. And you just think about how best to solve the problem for the brand and whatever medium is at hand. I don't know if you remember in 2007, it was all about the 360 planning. So it was really about sort of thinking outside the box. And that was just great training. And I just knew deep down that I was just like, this is the way forward, which is not necessarily thinking TV first, but thinking solution first and whichever platform. And also it was just so exciting that your canvas was suddenly so much bigger. So yeah, I continued on and went to different agencies and ended up at Drum, which I think is when we met as well. And everyone was sort of thinking that way, but I just honed my skill. But what was interesting is that it was a very small world at the time. We were just seen as like, oh, the ones that are doing content, you know, they're not doing TV, and everyone. And so it was quite hard personally. I was just like, I knew I was in the right direction. I knew that social was booming. I was talking to Google and Facebook, etc., before any creatives were speaking to them, and really thinking about the platform and the audience and how to communicate. But yeah, it was very lonely sort of area. And then finally, I think the world started to catch up. And that's when I decided to go freelance and work at different agencies and show how much I could help with different campaigns.
I think that conflict that you mentioned at the beginning about the somewhat glamorous sense of a TV ad, right? Like,
Yes.
kind of, that was like the ultimate goal, when in actual fact that's not necessarily the best thing to do for a brand. We've all seen now brands that have built up their social presence. I think that there's still a sense of it being the golden egg a little bit.
Yeah.
It would be really interesting to hear about specific campaigns or brands that you've worked on that have benefited from the content approach, or, you know, the social approach over TV, and what kind of successes you've seen there.
Yeah, I think thankfully the people that I've worked with, you know, recently have kind of seen, I've not had to sort of say, hey, we really need to invest in speaking differently to this audience, especially on social or wherever. So I've kind of been brought on to sort of really help just strengthen even more the type of campaigns that they were doing, but they were already thinking about it. So I guess a good example of that would be the Libresse Bodyform campaign called Womb Stories. I was super lucky to be part of this. This was a year-long campaign that the team had been working on. So this is the baby of Nadia Loscott and Nick Holly, the ECDs at AMV, and part of their team was also Margot, who is the strategy director, and there's also like creative teams like Lauren and Augustine, and I got to work with them like a little family, and that is just the best way of working. It was all about breaking taboos, really about sort of confronting the emotional bittersweet relationship women have with their wombs. So whether it's their periods, vaginas, uteruses, it was really about going deep and going where no one has gone before inside women's bodies, to bring that kind of womb world in all its beautiful, infuriating, emotional complexity, and really to challenge the dangerous myth of the single female biological narrative, which I don't know if you're familiar with it, I'm sure you are. It is everywhere. We are constantly bombarded as women with just that single narrative, or you're like this, you're like that. Whereas if you go and see the film, which I encourage everyone to do, you realize that we're much more complex. And I was brought in to help make sure that whatever we created really could work on different platforms, because it went out to a lot of different social platforms, because it's not just a UK campaign, but a global campaign. So it was very much about trying to find ways in which we could sort of tell, we had this beautiful film, but how can we sort of tell this kind of more complex message in a way that sort of works also on social, thinking about ways that we could edit it so the story was still there, but it's still, it sort of worked for these platforms. And also I had to look at, and also we wanted to, as a team, to see how we could engage an audience online, because it is so important that we sort of get people to talk about it, and women to sort of talk about their womb stories and be open about it, so we can really change this narrative. What I love so much about this campaign, it was very much about, really trying to break this taboo and change things. So I was very, very glad to be part of it. And it was even more important to me because I was towards the end of my pregnancy, and I went out just before it launched into my mat leave. So it was sort of perfect type of campaign to work on at that time.
And I think for your daughter to be born into a world that has got a narrative that's much more real, nuanced, no more roller skating in white shorts when it comes to period ads.
Exactly.
We feel seen, which is
exactly. And just also, if you look at the film, you'll realize, I think what Nick and Nadia done is an amazing job, and the team, is that they really managed to capture that we as women, have such a different relationship with our wombs. Like sometimes we love our wombs, we love having periods, and sometimes that's completely the opposite. And sometimes, our wombs don't function as well as we'd like them to. So it creates a lot of problems and a lot of pain. And, that is really hard to sort of portray in one film.
Throughout, this is sort of 13 years now from when your career started. And like you said, you came into it already with this mindset. You almost didn't have the, late 90s, early 2000s of the way that agencies and creators approach things, with the TV ad, the 60-second, 30-second TV ad being the ultimate thing. And also, I don't know about you, but at the beginning, everyone was trying to do it. They were creating this TV ad, they were sectioning it up, popping it
oh my God,
and hoping for the best. That, the amount of times I would see a full TV ad on my social feed, like, it frustrated the hell out of me. Agencies didn't quite get it, but everyone's kind of cottoning on now. Do you feel being at the forefront of that, it's kind of put you in good stead in terms of understanding how to approach a social campaign properly, and what are the do's and don'ts, like what
Yeah,
do you not do.
completely. I think I have seen the worst, because you can imagine at 2007 it was the type of things where you'd have like microsites where they would put a social video, like another video there that was not related to the TV campaign, or they would do a lot of the behind the scene of the TV. And yeah, so I've seen it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And for me, what not necessarily the do's and don'ts, or well, I could probably list them out, but it'd probably take another hour. But I think the key thing that I always come back to is honing in on an audience. What I cannot stand is when they say, 28 to 55 men and women, blah blah blah. It won't work. In fact, the more niche you are, and the reason why some companies are doing so well online is because they are niche. They know which audience they need to communicate to, and most importantly, they know how to communicate to them. So that's kind of key. I've always loved strategy because of what I was explaining at the beginning of starting at an agency that valued strategy so much. And what's great is I can really look at the brief and go, well, that's not a good brief, or this is not a good audience. And then from there I go, okay, well, I also know a lot about planning, because from the very beginning I've had to sort of think outside the box, and I wanted my canvas to be as big as possible. So I've learned all these different social channels, but often we think of content as just being social, but actually it could be a podcast. And I've done actually 2 podcasts for brands, or it could be an event. It could be a lot of many different things. The key thing is, will that audience be there? Will they resonate with your message if you're going to be in those places? And is it going to be a nice cohesive campaign? So actually a TV ad could work, because there are audiences that actually love a TV ad, or not as much as before, but that are on TV. So it might be worth it, but let's not be single-minded. Let's just try and think of a bigger canvas.
And the disjointed sort of sense of perhaps how it used to be, like you said, microsize and things that you want to be able to see something on TV or see something on a poster, out of home, and be able to go to your phone and for it to all link together, but not just in a copy and paste way.
That's right. Yeah. And I think a good example, to give you an example of what that would look like, I did a really long time ago now, some work for Carte Noir, which was quite big in the UK. They've changed. They've been bought out as a coffee brand, but it's definitely very big in France. And when I got given the brief, it was very much like, how can we sort of advertise in a different way, because our TV has not done well at all. Mm-hmm. And we were like, well, okay, fine, but you need to be really single-minded about your audience. So with a strategist, we worked out that they needed to be actually quite older audience, because they like to have the easiness of having coffee at home, but they want something more premium. And we realized, looking at that more niche audience, that they love the cinema. And what was interesting is that Carte Noir is a French brand that has done advertising all around that kind of cinematic love story. So what I did, again, sort of come up with a big idea, then wrote a script for a short film, all about a kind of love story that was set in Paris. And of course, she's drinking Carte Noir coffee. And it was very much sort of mimicking that kind of Godard cinematic style, taking the piss a little bit out of the French and how we take things very seriously. I can say that because I'm half French. And yeah, so I started with that. I sort of thought, okay, we've got an idea of where our audience is. They like films, they like to be in a cinema. Created this short film, managed to get it in the cinemas, but not in the TV section, but actually in the section where they did the trailers. So automatically you're sort of changing gears a little bit. You're sort of saying to people, this is not your normal cinema ad. And then we did a partnership with Everyman Cinemas, where we would have Q&As with French film directors, because we'd also done a partnership with The Guardian and did the whole French film cinema partnership. So it was all interlinked in that way. So you've got your Guardian, where you have all that kind of French film cinema season, and then you've got your Everyman Cinema, where you have your events, and you'd have like cocktails and with a Q&A made out of the Carte Noir coffee, and then of course the short film. And the reason I mention this is that for me, that was the perfect campaign of everything just fitting in together, but every single bit had to be just as good as the other. So, you know, though I had done the short film and worked hard and, you know, did a beautiful shoot in Paris, that wasn't enough. I needed to work hand in hand with The Guardian to try and make sure that whatever this French film season was going to resonate with that audience. And same with Everyman Cinema.
You're really giving people something. Like, we're all fed up of being advertised at, aren't we? Like, just we want to,
right.
we expect a brand, and I've seen so many brands do this so well, and this is the Carte Noir example is great, because you're giving people, you know, the film is lovely, it's kind of like, it's just charming, and, you know, it's something nice to watch. The fact, I didn't know that, I love the fact that it was put in the trailer section. That's really smart.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're giving people an experience. I mean, I love it. The great experiential events they stick with you, don't they? So
yeah, that's right.
Maybe reaching less people, but actually you're, again, if you get it out there about it, sometimes it's just about seeing it. So, okay, for example, the people that went to this event, how did it then get put out there? Did it go in The Guardian that there was an event with the Q&A?
Yes, yeah, that's right. So it was, in order to be at the event, you had to sign up to it through the Guardian online portal. So it was, again, this sort of seamless user journey. Yeah. So we knew that the core people that would go to that would be the ones who would shout the loudest as well, because, you know, the type of people that come to these events love to sort of put it on social and talk about it, etc. So yeah, it was sort of all perfect. But I should, you know, really stress that this is not just me. I'm a creative director. I come up with the ideas and everything else. I love the fact, for me, what's really important is to have an understanding of all these different bits. You know, I'm not scared of a media plan because I need to know where my idea is going, and I'm not scared of strategy because I know how important it is to identify what that audience needs. Now, that's great, but if you don't have the people in that team to make that happen, then it's not going to go anywhere. And that's the thing that happens for every successful campaign, is having a great team.
Yeah, I love that. And it's about collaboration. You know, you're not the hero of the idea. You're just giving people, you know, food for, then they run with it. You know, you plant a seed and you need to make sure it's holistic, but everyone has their stamp, don't they?
Exactly. Yeah.
I love this because it's also that merging of PR and advertising and marketing. It's like, you know, I worked on PR campaigns that have been effectively like TV ads in themselves, and I think I found it really hard at first, of like, oh, it's not a press release, it's not going in it's not an advertorial, you know, when it's not newspaper, just, you know, on the page, it has to be brought to life online, which involves video and all these other things. Do you want to talk a bit about the Uber project?
Yeah. So another example of the way at work, again, thinking sort of holistically, is and very much about the audience, is that I worked with the Elephant Room, this agency who got me in as a freelance creative director, and Uber came along and said, you know what, they had zero time. It was a very, very quick campaign, but they wanted to do something for International Women's Day. Now, a lot of brands do that, but you know, it was very much about having a message that resonated, that wasn't fake. You know, we've all seen it when brands can go so wrong. But thankfully, the woman we worked in at Uber already had this thought around London plaques in London. For those who don't know, the blue plaques, they're all about celebrating the great achievements of some of the key people in the UK who lived in London and their achievements, and they come in a little blue plaque, which is great, but they are only 14% of them are women, which is ridiculous because it feels like women didn't do anything. So yeah, just worked really quickly to sort of write up 3 very different films where we follow, again, not an influencer is the popular word for it, but I call them more sort of female culture maker, someone who has a really interesting voice that using their platform to sort of talk about it, and then look at through their lens, whether it was like music or architecture, etc., to try and work out their female heroes. And where, so what we did is we went to different places in London in an Uber and found out where their birthplaces were and the meaningful spots that would be part of the blue plaques, basically sort of dedicated to them. And each of these female culture makers would describe a person of significance behind that woman and why they deserve their own blue plaques, basically. And the reason I'm mentioning this campaign is for every type of campaign that I work on, I always try and find what's important for that audience, but also what for me is an important message to sort of push across. And the blue plaques and the fact that it only had 14% of women are part of the blue plaque was just so appalling, that I really wanted to sort of see if there was a way to break that and to create some engaging films out of it. So not only did we do these little films, but we also made sure that whatever we created needed to fit with the platform it was going to be delivered to. So it was going to be on Instagram stories and on a channel, Instagram Uber channel. So that means that, and something that I see constantly, is that people don't think about the fact that on stories, it's a very different ratio. It's 9:16. So that means when you're filming, you can't go wide. You have to think, vertically. And actually, rather than seeing it as a challenge, you can do some really fun stuff with it. And you can just see it as just a different way of treating the film that feels more exciting. And that means that it again resonates more with the audience, because the audience feels like they've been thought of. It's going to look different on their feeds, etc.
I think often the biggest challenge is the fact that you've got one opportunity to film, but it needs to work across so many different
1,000
on YouTube. Okay, you want it to be landscape, and then we're looking at obviously vertical. I remember that years back when it was like it was sacrilegious to be able to suggest that something would be vertical, but actually it's so powerful. I think it's great because it really allows humans to be portrayed in a different way. I mean, it's a
that's right
person, isn't it? It's perfect for headshots and it's perfect for full body shots.
Yeah.
And if you're smart about it and don't see it as a hindrance, like, you can really embrace it, get really creative.
Yeah, exactly.
And TikTok is pulling us in that direction anyway, so there's no choice.
Yeah, exactly.
So just on the subject of things like TikTok, so for you, to kind of to sort of round this up, because you've done such great stuff, but I almost feel like it's just the beginning, right? Like, what do you see for the future? What's exciting for you in terms of, obviously you're on maternity at the moment, but when you come sort of back and your plans, obviously you've got your fantastic podcast, like what are your
that's a really good question. I have about 1,000 things to say. So first of all, again, something that's a subject that's close to my heart is maternity leaves, because we all know that it's such a big problem in our society, in the sense that it feels that if a woman goes on maternity leave, she almost loses her brain and tries to come back to work, but maybe doesn't have the same sort of job, or things are more challenging because she has to juggle all these different things, and maybe their employers don't think of them differently. Thankfully, I'm freelance, so in some ways I don't have an employer apart from myself, and I do those decisions. But I've made a conscious decision not to just say that I'm on mat leave, because to be honest, my brain is constantly working. Even though my daughter is 3 months old, as you said, I do my podcast on the side, and I could be working not straight away, but I don't want to have limits into this is only what I can do and I will only start working there and then. I just want things to be fluid, and I want to try and change that stigma around mat leaves, basically. So it may be that my husband, I'm very lucky, is going to have 6 months paternity leave for his work, so that's, things are changing. So it might be that I will come back into work earlier. In terms of what it means for me in terms of work, I just want to continue what I've been doing for the past 2-3 years that I've been freelancing, with just, really helping different agencies create really great work, but also just thinking about different platforms in a different way. So for me, it's not like, I'm an expert in social, I'm an expert in content. Do you know what? I'm a problem solver at heart. Whatever is next is what I'm always making sure that I've got a lot of knowledge on. So podcasts was a thing that had just started, about exploding about 5 years ago, I want to say, maybe less than that, I don't know, in the UK, but in the States. So I made it my thing to sort of really understand that medium. I fell in love with it. That's why I started my own podcast, and I interview other women about the good, the bad, and the ugly of their career. But just to give you an example, so I did the podcast because I wanted to find out more about it and making sure I was on the pulse, and it'll be the same thing for TikTok, whatever is next. I think it's so important in general, if you're a problem solver, to just try and find out what is the next thing that people aren't thinking about, because then you'll always have the edge compared to other people. So that's kind of it in some ways.
I think the whole voice recognition stuff is fascinating.
Yes.
And the way in which brands can really embrace that. And it's it's not an empty space, obviously, but it's a really open space for brands to be thinking really smartly.
That's right. Lenses is also great. Like, that's not been utilized very well. So, lenses on things like Pinterest and Google, where you use your phone and you can sort of literally sort of take a picture and it sort of brings up what it is.
Yeah.
You could do some really cool stuff.
When I'm on walks with my daughter and she's like, what's that flower? What's that bug?
Yeah.
I will take a picture of it and it pops up and it recognizes and I sound really smart, but
no, it's good. It
takes me 30 seconds to get there, but absolutely, like, brands, if you take a photo of a skirt and it pops up then with similar skirts from similar brands, and you're
exactly. Yeah. And that's what's exciting, right? Like, I just think rather than try and be scared of change, which is actually quite interesting in the current climate, let's just embrace it, because change will always be there, so the more comfortable you are with the uncomfortable, the better.
What a lovely end.
I've done this before.
Just to kind of wrap up as well, I'm absolutely, when it comes to, and obviously freelance is slightly different from being full-time somewhere, but embracing a new way of looking at maternity. We're in the perfect industry for making it fluid, for ensuring that women are, I don't know about you, and I'm sure over time and the next few months you'll really feel this, and I hope for you that you really do, you might already, having a child and being fortunate enough to have a child and to want one has given me a whole new perspective on work. I feel like I'm better at what I do. I feel empowered. It's been everything but a hindrance,
Yeah,
and I think
completely.
society looks at it for women to, this is a whole other podcast or other but society looks at women, and it is changing, but a bit too slowly, who have gone on maternity. And I felt it too. I was like, maybe I don't go back, or you kind of have all of these,
the stigma,
weighted things that are subconscious.
Yeah.
But
I'll tell you what, I always set out to be freelance and do my own maternity leave, save up for it, etc. because I didn't want to be, you know, it's different for everyone, but that was my choice. I didn't want to be necessarily sort of stuck to one agency and feel like that pressure of coming back and all the things that comes around it. That also comes with its challenges, because then, you know, I still have to look for work when I come back in. But the reason I'm saying all this is that it's really important to find, you know, as you said, it's so empowering to have a child. And I set out to go to freelance, but also to see before the pandemic if agencies would be willing to work remotely. I swear to God, that was my plan. I was just going to try and pitch as many agencies as possible to let me work remotely, because I found that I work, and I know you're the same, 10 times better with the quietness of being at home. And then the pandemic happened, and I was like, oh, actually, you've done me a massive favor, because now, you know, bosses realize that you can work very effectively from home. You're not going to skive off. And yeah, and it makes people more happy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'm hoping I'll continue to do, but who knows?
Change is good. Thank you so much.
Change is good.
This has been lovely, and it's just
Thank you so much.
yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.